First of all, I'd like to thank Open Ukraine for inviting me. I think this is a very stimulating and useful gathering, so it's an honor to take part in it. The object of snap sections is, I assume, to stimulate discussion, so I'll try to be reasonably staccato. I would also like to say probably what is the single word of regard and sympathy for Russia by way of opening. I say Russia rather than the regime, but my experience of Russia naturally includes meetings with many people of higher moral courage than I can possibly claim to know I would have were I under the sort of pressure that they are. And we must remember all the time that such people still exist in Russia. I want to begin by really a summary of what I have to say, which comes from a saying from the Talmud. And that is, power buries those who wield it. When I say that, or rather when the Talmud says it, I think one must have Russia and Putin very much in mind. This primarily, what we've been discussing for the whole of today, is Russia's tragedy, cemented by the return of Putin to the Kremlin in May 2012, with Putin as the central element in the international crisis we've been discussing. Ukraine's reaching out for a different and, to my mind, better model contradicts the aspirations of the present-day Kremlin. And I would like to join the tribute that David Kramer and others have paid to Ukraine's courage in pursuing a far better course. Ukraine is not a prize to be struggled for between the West and Russia. It is a problem disputed between East and West, but the real problem is what Russia has become and how it may develop further. So I'll touch on three aspects and offer a short conclusion. First, Russia's perception of its interests. Secondly, its governing system. And third, its prospects. Russia sees its prospects, or its interests rather, as those of a great power, and its privileges being denied by the West, and by the United States in particular. It has no understanding, apparently, or wish to understand, that Russians' own actions have consequences. The Yalta imagined by Putin, and I've at least got the first word of the title in his speech to the UN General Assembly last September, never existed. The Yalta system was never one which promoted peace and harmony in Europe, and the prospect of it being revived now is negligible. An article by Foreign Minister Lavrov on 3 March in Russia and World Affairs extended the argument as to Moscow's right to be at the center of one of the imagined heartlands of the world, formed in this case essentially from the countries of the former Soviet Union. His arguments, and those of the regime as a whole, are bolstered by discredited Eurasianism with disreputable origins, including one from one of my own countrymen, Mackinder. The elements in this description of Russia's interests feed into and feed upon the Kremlin's obsession with the United States. Washington is seen as both the heart of a power due to decline and also as responsible for all setbacks to Russia. We had a truly absurd example in the issue of the Panama Papers, imagined by spokesman of Russia to have been deliberately engineered by the United States as a way to punish Russia. But more important, the Russian understanding of the United States is deeply distorted by this delusion about the United States. just as the Kremlin's understanding of its neighbors in Europe is distorted by its perception of itself as the natural ruling driver of the area. Russia, as a result of these errors, makes absolutely fundamental mistakes, as it has in Ukraine and in Syria. Russia's true national interests would be served much better by an effort to work with its neighbors than its present attempt to force its friendship upon them. It is also for question how long the regime's interests in preserving Putin's rule can be promoted by a program of aggression or assertiveness, as they would prefer to call it, abroad. Being a great power does not feed people or promote their underlying well-being. Putin's choice of repression and retrenchment in May 2012 is now irreversible. The power vertical is also a delusion if it's meant by that a system which would achieve effective control from the top. Increasing corruption, increasing ineffectiveness is a necessary consequence of the power vertical. And that includes the corruption of the intelligence available to the country's leaders, rejecting substantive economic reforms and the political reforms implied by those was in one fashion understandable as a way for the Kremlin to preserve the rule of the present cabal in the face of the considerable upheavals that would occur and will still occur when Russia seeks to reform itself. But it was also to trap Russia into its present economic and social difficulties. That may suit directly interested parties in and beyond the Kremlin, but it is a betrayal of the country's wider interests. Perhaps there is some apprehension at the top of the present system as to the dangers of the construction of a condition of latent anarchy in their country. There are at least signs of such fear in the regime's warnings of the dangers of color revolutions, their preparations for what on the face of it should be a comfortable outcome to this year's Duma's elections, and notably in Putin's decision to set up a national guard answerable to him personally, given, as far as I can understand it, more or less unlimited powers to decide what to do. My conclusion, therefore, is that Putin has locked himself into a triple dynamic of failure. He is the prisoner of his past. The state beyond his immediate reach has atrophied and has neither the power nor the executive ability to revive Russia's economic or societal fortunes. The search for legitimacy by means of establishing Russia as a great power is beyond the Kremlin's reach, for all that those who believe in the West that we should somehow humor it. We do not know who, what, or when a successor to Putin will arrive. But we do know that before he or she or they arrive in power, they will have to make changes, and that such changes will proceed against Putin's either existing will or will after his death, and that this will most likely prove to be a time of danger for us all. I promised David that I would get the word Nuremberg somehow into the end of this presentation. I do not think there will be Nuremberg in the sense of Victor Power's assembling a court to try the rulers of Russia for their deeds or crimes, but I do think that one way or another, in the end, and this is, for me, a hope, that Russia itself will decide that what has been done to it and in its name is simply not good enough. Thank you. That would be Nuremberg, sorry. I promised I'd say it. Nuremberg.
Andrew, thank you.